This is General George S. Patton. Along with Dwight Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur, he's probably one of the most well-known of the U.S. generals in the Second World War. Patton, who was a flamboyant and controversial figure, entered the stage in World War II as the U.S. Second Corps commander in North Africa. He then went on to command the U.S. 7th Army in Sicily and was the commander of the U.S. 3rd Army in the drive from France to Germany. Whenever you hear people talk about World War II in the European theater, you never hear anybody refer to Bradley's First Army. But one thing that you will always hear whenever people talk about the Third Army is the name Patton attached to it. Almost anybody I've ever talked to who either served in the Third Army or who had a father or grandfather in the Third Army says that they were in Patton's Third Army. George Patton was a larger-than-life figure, also a very controversial figure who got himself into trouble sometimes. And as you might expect, here at the Gettysburg Museum of History, they have some artifacts directly tied to one of the most famous generals of all time.
I'm going to show you a couple of items from our collection from General George Patton, and these are personal items. And the first item I want to show you is this personal razor. This was his razor. It's a safety razor that would have came in this box, and it has his name, General George Patton, G. Patton, and it's made by Gillette. And it's a travel razor that he would have had with him during his time in World War II. Now, this razor was left behind by General Patton when he was making his way through Europe, and it was picked up by another soldier who had tried to return it to General Patton. He always had that intention, but Patton kept moving quicker than the other people, and he was a rear echelon kind of guy, and so he never was able to catch up with General Patton and return it, so he ended up keeping it as a souvenir. Pretty interesting. I bought that directly from the soldier who took its son. The next item I want to talk about is Patton's silver. Now, we've talked before about Hitler's silver from World War II, or from the era. This is one of Patton's personal silver pieces. It's made by Christophe in France, and it was bought by him in 1945. It has the Christophe maker mark there. It's very heavy, it's very high quality, and the stamp here is not Patton's personal monogram like you see in many silver pieces of the time. Most people had their own personal monogram or something like this. But Patton chose to place his beloved Third Army on his silver. That was kind of the pinnacle of his career, and when General Patton died in 1945, Mrs. Patton gave one setting to General Keyes, and we obtained this from General Keyes' estate. Next item is this book, and it's titled 15 Decisive Battles. And this came from his time at WWII, and has his personal stamp there, G.S. Patton. And it's a history book about different military campaigns. And Patton was a believer in reincarnation. He was very into history and his personal place in history. So it's interesting he would have a book like this. It seems very much something he would probably read.
So Patton, being a man of history, and as Erik said, would have read this book on the 15 decisive battles, kind of has me interested in knowing what was considered to be the 15 decisive battles of the world. So it looks like chapter 1 is on the Battle of Marathon. Looks like the defeat of the Athenians at Syracuse, chapter 2. And then moving on here, I'm not going to read every single one of them. Looks like chapter 7 is the Battle of Tours. Chapter 8, Battle of Hastings. That was with William the Conqueror. Fun fact, I'm a direct descendant of William the Conqueror. Chapter 9, Joan of Arc's victory over the English at Orleans. And then we go to the end here. We have the Battle of Valmy. Yeah. Oh, and then ending, chapter 15, is the very famous Battle of Waterloo. Interesting to think of General Patton, well, maybe not General Patton at the time, but George Patton reading this book and gleaning some of the lessons of history from it.
For those of you who may comment and worry about the return of Pattons Razor, it has been approved by the family of General Patton to be at the Gettysburg Museum of History, and I'll tell that story. A few years ago, we had the Medal of Honor conference in Gettysburg, and a man comes through the door here, and he says, "I understand you have my grandfather's razor." And I look up, and there is General Patton's grandson, and looks a lot like him. And I was like, oh boy. So I told him the story and everything and showed him around the museum. And he said, "I am very happy that this razor is in this museum." So it's approved by the Patton family.
That's awesome. Well, there you go. Some of the items right here attached to General George Patton. Really one of the most famous generals in U.S. history. A lot of that had to do with his big personality. And then there was also the movie Patton with George C. Scott that has made him really an iconic figure in American history. And you can come right here to the Gettysburg Museum of History and see some of this stuff for yourself.